Hey guys, welcome back to yet another portion of this the RAT course series. In this portion of the series, we're going to go ahead and implement a locally hosted SQLite database for being able to properly save settings for like auto listening and being able to auto listen on ports. Now we're also going to be we can add like many different things in here, but today we're just going to add the base setup for the database. That way, in future videos, it won't take as long to add features that we want to be able to, save and load to and from the database. So to get started, let's go ahead and hop over to our Form 1's on creation event procedure. Now, I've cleared mine out. Yours will still have some code in here. So you can leave your code in here if you like. I'm just going to start from scratch and just program everything in that we're going to need for the database, as well as all of our other code as well, because we already have the keyboard hooking and all that good stuff in there already. So just you guys can leave it in there if you like, or you can follow along. The decision is totally up to you. We're going to need to make a couple of different variables here. First of all, whether or not the database exists, which will be a Boolean. Which means true or false. We're also going to need a temporary query to be able to query database tables and stuff like that. So we'll just make it a temp query, and that'll be a tFireDAC query component. So now we will be able to, if I spelled this correctly, guys, hang on just a minute. Let me TFDQUERY. I believe that's how you spell query. There you go. I misspelled it the first time. Okay, so now that we have our two declarated variables that we'll need to accomplish this goal, so guys, in case some of you are still a little bit hazy on why we're doing this, the problem with this RAT so far is when you open it up, you've always got to come here and click on listen, right? And that's kind of annoying. So what I've done so far is I've added a stop button, I've added a label, and I've added a toggle switch. Okay, so you guys need to add these three things: the stop, the label, and the toggle switch for being able to toggle auto listen on and off. Okay, so once you've done that, we can proceed. So whenever the RAT loads, if you had this toggled to the on position, we want to be able to automatically load the RAT in a listening state, rather than having to run the RAT, come here, click listen every stinking time. You know what I mean? Because doing that is just absolutely horrific, right? So that's why we're going to do this today. We're going to make a locally hosted database file. So when the RAT loads up, in the background, we're going to create a SQLite, locally hosted SQLite database file on your hard drive. Okay, and inside of that database, we're going to put a place for the settings, which means anything in this panel, right? So let's go ahead and get started. Now that we've got our first two declared variables, whether or not the database file exists, true or false, and a temporary query for doing temporary things with the database, okay? So you actually have a couple of choices, like what you can actually do. So let me just make this clear. The two choices you have are as follows. You can use a software like Navicat. So I have Navicat here pulled up. You can actually create a database using this, and it does support SQLite as well as pretty much any other database type you can find in here. And you can create a database with this software, and it'll give you an actual DB file, which is a database. And you can then take that database, the one in here, whatever, and you can stuff it into your project. Like you can actually stuff it into your RAT executable binary. You can go to Project, Resources, and Images, and you can stuff it in here by clicking Add and then browsing to the file which will be in here or whatever, wherever you produced it with Navicat. And you can add it in there and give it a resource identifier and call it whatever you want. And that means that at runtime, you could pull the database out of the executable's resources and mess with it that way. However, that is not the way that I'm going to do it today. However, we are going to quickly go over databases in Navicat because we're going to make a new one just real quick, just for fun. So let's go with a new connection, and let's go with SQLite. And I want this to be called a new SQLite 3 database. I want to call it just for fun. And we're going to make that database file appear on my desktop just for shits and gigs. And we're going to call it db.db. And we're going to hit save. Okay, hit OK. So now we have a just for fun database, okay? And in case you guys can't see it, you should be able to see this. If I pull the database file here, you see how I'm dragging right here? It's db.db and it looks like a couple of gears, okay? That's the file on my desktop, okay? So I'm going to just leave it on my desktop, but we're going to double click on it, go into main, go to tables, right click, new table, and we're going to call this, this table will be called settings, but here we want like default port varchar. We'll just make it varchar size 255. We don't really care what we're doing here. And then on this one, we'll do auto listen, and then this will be, I'll just also make this varchar, whatever. It can be anything you'd like. Make it something meaningful. Should have been like more like a Boolean type, but whatever. So I'm going to hit save and call this settings. So now when I close the design view and actually go into the table itself, you can see we have a default port and an auto listen. The auto listen could be 0 or 1. So I'll put 0 for that. That means it's not automatically listening. And the default port would be like, 34, 35, or whatever we use in our RAT, and I'm going to accept that. So now these values have been placed into the database. So when the RAT runs, it's going to query, it could query just for fun, for example, and it could query the table of settings, and it could find the default port and the auto listen actual like values, and it could pull them out and use them actively as the program runs in memory. Okay, so when you run it, it's going to automatically go into the database, pull the settings, grab the port and throw it here, check if it's supposed to be auto listening, and if it is, this will be true to on, and this will be automatically clicked, and this will be automatically activated. So it will be automatically be listening every single time that we run the RAT project, unless you click auto listen to off, in which case we will perform another query to the database to execute SQL code to make sure that this value becomes 0. If it was 1, then that means it's auto listening, and this will be true and on when we run the RAT. If this is 0, like here, like that, then that means that it won't be listening. You kind of get that, guys? That's kind of what we're going to do today, okay? Now I'm going to close this out, and I'm also going to delete that database from my desktop, because we're not going to mess with that. We're going to make a whole new database. We're going to go balls to the walls, and we're going to make the database 100% on our own. That's right. That means we're not going to use Navicat like I just did in a graphical manner. We're going to actually go balls to the walls deep and make the database by our fucking selves. So in this particular case, what we're going to do is we are going to have to basically put all of our code back the way we had it. So the code that you guys pretty much already have, let's go ahead and keep that in there. So I've already got my code copied from Notepad. You guys will probably already have your code already in here. This is the code we should have already had, okay? Now we begin checking if the database exists. So when the form loads in memory and gets created, we're going to do all of our normal stuff that we've already programmed in previous videos. Okay, you follow me? Now we're going to start doing something new, and this is the database code. Okay, so we're going to check if the database file exists. So again, we had this db exists as a Boolean. We're going to set that to be equivalent to whether or not a file exists and it's going to be db.db. We're just going to call our database db.db, okay? So if this file exists next to our executable file, because I didn't put a path, that means it's automatically going to check in the same directory that our exe is running from, okay? So if it exists, it'll be true or false. So if the file is there, it's true. If it's not there, it's false. So we are now going to initialize our database connection. So database initialization, whatever, don't care if I misspell. So we're going to do a try statement, okay? And we're going to try to configure the DB connection. So we're going to simply put, and what you'll need to do, guys, go back to your form. You're going to have to add all of these. So I'll put them in order for you so you can see clearly. I can see clearly now, the rain is gone. Okay, so there you go. You're going to need a FD connection, you're going to need an FD query, and you're going to need a SQLite driver link, which is basically a provider to the database driver of SQLite. So again, guys, you can find these. Just type that in up here. So we'll do connection. So you guys can go over to FireDAC and then close out here. So these are all the components, right? So you've got, you're going to want to get your FireDAC connection, this one. So this one right here, drag and drop it. You're going to want your, to get your query. So this one right here, drag and drop that. Then you're going to want to go to the FireDAC links, and you're going to want to get the SQLite, which is this one right here. Okay, and drag it, okay? So once you have all three of these set up, you're good to go, okay? So in the code, we'll go back to the code. So again, we're testing to see if the database even exists, and then we're going to try to do some database configuration and make the database connection possible, right? So we know if the database file exists or not already. Now let's go down here and finish up our logic here and see if we can try to create dynamically the ability to create this this database. So what I've done essentially is I'm just checking if a database is there for now, but down here we're going to actually set up these components, all of them, to be able to connect to a SQLite database in the event that one does exist. But we're going to use an if-then else statement to be able to actually determine if a connection can be made, etc., based on if the database file exists. If it does exist, we'll just connect to it. It's that simple. If it does not exist, we're going to have to create the database ourselves, okay? So down here, we're going to continue on. So first of all, we want to make sure, we'll say self.fd connection1.connected. This needs to be false. We do not want to be connected to anything whatsoever. We also want to say fd connection1 dot parameters. So I think it's params, and we're going to clear those out. No parameters, no nothing. We want to make sure we're completely 100% reset, clean, and ready to make a new connection to a database, okay? So we're going to make sure we're not connected. We're going to make sure that the parameters are absolutely cleared out. Now we have to add a parameter telling the component that we're looking to connect to a SQLite database file, which is a locally hosted file, right? So self.fd connection1.params.add, and we're going to add a driver ID, which is equivalent to SQLite, and that is that. So we've now set it up where we can do this, but we also have to tell it what database file we're looking for to connect to, and whether or not we want a login prompt to be prompted up in our face, which we don't. So we're going to say self.fd connection1.params.values. For the database value, we're looking to look at the database file that we should have available to us or not. So we also want to set the login prompt, like I said. So if every time you ran something to connect to this database with these components, if the database is password protected, you could actually have it you could hard code a value in for the user and the password, or you can have the login prompt not pop up at all. Now in our case, we're not encrypting anything. We're not protecting the database. We can add it later if you like, but for now we're not doing any of that special crap. So self.fd connection1.login, Here, let me, login prompt is false. We do not want it to show a login prompt of any kind. Now, let's make a connection to the database. So at this point, we're ready to go ahead and try to see if we can connect, right? So we're going to say, self.fd connection1.connected is going to be equal to true. Okay, now if database does not exist, create the tables and insert default values. So guys, on the rat, if you look in the settings stuff here, you can clearly see that we have a port number and we have auto listen. So that means that we need to have a couple of default values for these when the rat loads. So let's go ahead and pop back to the code, because we're going to have to hard code those default values into it if a database does not exist. So we're going to simply put here, if not DB exists, which means if the database does not exist, if DB exists is not true, which means no database exists, then what we're going to do is we're going to have to say, again, we're going to do a kind of an encapsulation of code here. So let me pull this down. So inside of the begin and the end brackets here for this, we're going to go ahead and set up a default database, if you will. So first of all, we have to create manually the settings table. So we're going to simply put self.fd connection1 dot execute SQL, and we are going to execute the SQL of, let's do create table if not exists settings, okay? And we're going to have ID, integer, primary, key, auto increment, so it auto increments up. There's really no need for this, guys, to be honest with you, because we're not actually just doing it. We're just shoving in 2 fucking pieces of data in there. We really don't have to do it this way, but whatever. Setting name and the text, which is not to be null, unique. And if you guys don't know this, this is not Delphi code. This is SQL or SQL, simple query language. So it's a little bit different. If you've ever messed with databases before, this kind of, it's really super simple to do. You could also do like on things where you're like looking into stuff, you could say select whatever table from whatever, or row from table, whatever, select asterisk, which is select all. There's all kinds of cool stuff you can do with SQL to like try to get to where you're going. In this case, we're forcing the SQL commands to actually create tables manually, which is the same thing. Here, let me show you. Like, it's literally the same thing I did for the just for fun thing, which I no longer have. Let me delete this connection. But it's the same thing as if we went here and actually created this. I'll just call that whatever. And then I'll put this to my desktop. I'll just call it whatever. And yeah, so if you go into this thing, you can go into the main. So what we're doing right now in code, which is create table if it does not exist, is the same thing as me going here, 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 boom. I just created a table. Well, not really. There, I'll do that. I'll do text, and then I'll do like this. And then if I hit save, so if I hit save, and then we call this settings, it's like me clicking the save button here, man, like through graphical wise, right? So this Navicat actually creates the table. You see, I just created it. So now it's in there called settings, and we have a setting called ASDF, right? So we're doing all of this by hand in code rather than being able to graphically create it in a program software like Navicat, right? So I'm going to close that out. All right, not needed. So, oh boy, I lost my train of thought here, boys. Let me see where I'm at. So we're creating the table if it doesn't exist. We got ID, integer, primary, ground, setting name, not null, unique. Yep. Okay, looking good, looking good. Okay, so we need the value. Okay, that's where I'm at. Okay, so it'll be the setting value, and it will be text, not null at all. We're not allowing it to be null. So we can come outside of that. We have to have a bracket in there, and I believe that's it. So there we go. So that'll create the table if it doesn't exist and whatnot. This little parenthesis thing closes here. Okay, that looks like a valid SQL statement to me. So I think that will work. So we're creating the table if it doesn't exist, and it's called settings, and it has two values in it, two rows. It has the setting name and the setting value. Both are going to be text, which cannot be null. And that is pretty much that. So, but it also has the integer primary key auto increment, which is just a way for us to lock onto stuff if we ever needed to. We may use it, we may not, I don't know. But in any case, that's that. So that creates the settings table manually. Now we have to insert our default values. Let's start with, and we'll start with the default port number for the rat to listen on. Okay. So for this, we're going to say self.fd connection1.execute SQL, same damn thing we did a minute ago. We're going to insert into settings, which is the table that we just created, right? And we're going to do the setting name to the setting value of values. And the values we're going to put in this are going to be listen port, and we're going to do 3435 for that, and that will be the end of that. So we should be able to stick this in here as insert into settings, the setting name, the setting value, I believe we need a space there, and then we're going to put the values of listen port, and that port will be 3435, okay? So listen port goes into settings name. 3435 is the default rat port that's going to be shoved into the value, the settings value, okay? So we've done that. Now we need the second one, which is, we're practically going to do the same freaking shit. So guys, we can literally copy this whole line of code right here. Okay, and I'm gonna put a comment here. I'm gonna put insert auto listen because that's the next one. Auto listen default value of 0. So we do not start auto listening. So boom, we're gonna paste that in, and we're gonna change this to auto listen, and we're gonna change this to 0. Okay, great, perfect. So now we've done all of that. We've injected our default values and everything. So we've got our listen port of 3435. We've got our auto listen property, which is true or false, 0 or 1. And that's that. So now we can proceed. So at this point, we have those in, and we need, we can just go ahead and end this actually. We're actually done with the block. If the database does not exist, then we automatically create it by injecting those rows and those values into the settings table, which we also create subsequently because we're creating the table and then its rows, both of them, and the values to be automatically stuffed into that. So now that we're done with that crap, we can move on to creating a temporary query, which is going to load the settings. Because remember guys, when you run the rat, you want to be able to click run on it, and when it runs, it's going to query that database and pull the correct data, and then we want it to take action on that data. So if for example, if the data that we shoved in was 1 here, we want it to auto listen. So we're going to pull the port, throw it onto the forms, spin edit, and then we're going to make sure this button gets automatically clicked, and this needs to show that it is actively auto listening. Okay? And likewise, vice versa, if we don't have it auto-listening, then we still want it to pull the default port here, which is the last port number that the user did use for the rat, but we don't want it to auto-listen if the auto-listen is off. So this is going to be kind of a simple if-then statement type thing, right? Okay, so let's go back to the code, and right here, right before the finally, where we're actually going to essentially free up our temporary query that we're going to be using. In fact, I'll go ahead and type that in right now. So even though we haven't really done too much here, but we're going to free the temporary query, but we haven't actually done too much with it yet. So, okay, so this is fine. We're going to start coding right here now, okay? So what we need to essentially do is create the temporary query. So we're going to say, here, let me copy this real quick and just paste it. Temp query is going to be equivalent to tfd query dot create no owner whatsoever. We're just going to nil that. So it is in memory by itself, and we can call it and do whatever the fuck we want to with it. Yay. So we are now going to create another try statement. Okay. So we will go ahead and do this. Type try, hit enter, and we're going to proceed. So now that we've created our query, we need to tell the query, hey, you're going to be owned or in control of by the current connection that we have. So that's going to be the FD connection 1. Okay, so we have to assign it. We have to say temp query dot connection is equivalent to, and we're just going to simply put FD connection 1 like that. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and make the query have some SQL inside of itself to execute. And what we're trying to do here, guys, is we're trying to get the setting name and the setting value from settings, and we're going to loop them. Okay, we're going to do a loop like boom, boom, loop. We're going to loop twice to be specific. Okay, because again, we're looping for the port and the auto listen, and that's it. That's all we're doing, right? It's super, super basic, super, super simple, right? So we've got the connection set up. Now we have to set the SQL. So temp query.sql.add, and we are going to add some SQL. However, I think I'll do .text. So it's going to be equivalent to select setting name and setting value from settings. That's it. That'll be more than sufficient for our loop, okay? We're going to select both the setting name and the setting value from the settings table. And then we're going to say open. We're going to open this query, temp query.open. And that's it. So now we are going to come down. So let's come down a little bit here, and we're going to process each setting that we loop open, or we loop, process each setting that we loop through from the database. Okay, so that'll be better, like to put like that. So basically, we're going to say while not temp query.eof, which stands for end of file. So while it's not at the end of the file, which means it's still looping through the database, loop, 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 loop. It can loop as long as it has to until it reaches the end of the database, right? So we're going to say while you're not at the end yet, we're going to have to begin doing something. Handle the port setting. That's the first one we're going to handle, okay? Because if you remember, guys, inside the database, we created the port first. Then we created the auto listen next. So let's just go ahead and handle them in the proper order that we also created them in, okay? So if temp query dot field by name, and that field by name is setting name dot as string, is equivalent to listen port, then we are going to say spin edit 1 dot value is going to be equivalent to string to int defined as temp query dot field by name setting value, the value of the setting rather, dot as a string. And for this, we want to just put, say, like, we'll just put, I think we'll just put 3435. Okay. So there you have it. That's that. Now we also have to handle the auto listen setting. So next, let's handle the auto listen setting. So now we've handled that. So if you guys get a real good gist of that, we've handled the default, 34, 35, whatever. But we now have to handle the auto listen number, the integer 0 or 1. So we're going to put, let's do an else statement here. Let's erase this so we can continue our lines. And let's put else if the temp query dot field by name, and we're going to put the setting name dot as string is equal to auto listen. Then begin doing something here. We want to say if temp query dot field by name setting value, like that, setting value dot as string, then is equal to the 1, we'll put 1 in here. So if it's equal to 1, then we're going to say toggle switch 1 dot state is equal to toggle switch on, like that. Okay. Else we're going to say that the toggle switch is off. So toggle switch 1 dot state is equal to toggle switch off, like that. We're also going to say form1 dot button 2, which is the stop button, is going to be disabled false. So we'll put dot enabled false. Okay, that's it. That's pretty much it, guys. And that takes care of that business. So let's go ahead and take this out because we have to continue for an else statement. And that's it. That should do it. Let me control D this. And that looks to me like pretty good logic. I'm going to read through it one more quick time, just real fast. So we got our crap that we do, blah, blah, blah. We're setting up the database if it doesn't exist. We're doing the database. We're checking it. We're making the table. We're making both rows and injecting the default values. We're creating a query. We're looping through both. We're pulling. We're checking them. And we are then applying that. And we are also applying these if the conditions are met. And that's pretty much that. So we also want to do one more thing. Now, this is where we set the button to false, but the loop will not go unless we call temp query.next. Okay, so that will be fine. That's it. That is the entirety of the code that you need to really do. And something else also, guys, instead of this being here, it would probably be a better idea to copy this and paste it here. This one can just be an overall except instead of a finally. And we'll just come down and say on E exception do show message, and we'll just do database initialize here, database initialization error, and we'll just do the here we'll just do like this and do e dot message for the error message, exactly what we're going to get. And that's pretty much it. So that's it, boys. That's it. Perfect. We'll save that. So now that we have this and everything's done, we need a way to save these settings to the database. So guys, let me explain something to you. When we run the rat and we click on the settings page, when we're changing the values of the numbers in this thing, or we're clicking on the auto toggle for the toggle switch for auto listen, we want to be able to query the database and update those settings in real time as we're updating this stuff. Okay, so to do that, we could do it on the spin edit one change, and we could also do it on the toggle switch click event procedure. Okay, but the problem with that is, since we have two things to do, there's no sense in writing code in two separate places. This is something I'd really like to teach you guys. So there's no point in me sitting here trying to code something twice, which is ridiculous. So instead of that, why don't we just make a new procedure at the top of the code? So here, let me go all the way to the top. And we are going to make a new procedure for ourselves. And that procedure is just going to be part of the tform1 class. So let's pop on down here to our procedures list. And for this, we're going to make a new procedure for save settings. Database settings, like that. Okay. So for this, we can do, we can just type in procedure, and we'll just call it, let's just call it save settings, like that. Okay. And I'll use the keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-C to create that. So now we're already down in the code and we're ready to roll, right? So if you guys didn't catch that, just so you guys understand what I just did, I created a new procedure. Okay, so I created a new procedure, and then it was red saying that it was unsatisfied forward declaration because I didn't create it yet. All I did was hit Control-Shift-C, and it actually created it down below. So that's something that I really am going to start trying to use that more often, because believe it or not, that actually does save quite a bit of time. So in any case, here we are. We are back to our save settings procedure. So what we're going to need is we're going to have to create a temporary query again. Okay, so we're going to call this temp query, and it is going to be a tfiredac query. And then we are going to program this query to inject, if you will, or insert, SQL insert, or update our settings that already should pre-exist in the database. Okay. Now remember, we only have two settings in the database. We have the port and the 0 or the 1 for auto listen. That's it. That's all we have to worry about, right? So we're going to just simply put a little checking here. If not, fd connection 1 dot connected, then we are going to say fd connection 1 dot connected equals true. We're going to connect to the database if we're not connected already. That's all that is doing. Okay, we're just doing a simple check. Now, what we're going to do is create our query. So temp query will be equivalent to firedac query dot create nil. No owner, nothing whatsoever. It's just in RAM waiting for us to call it and do whatever the hell we want to do. We're going to do a try statement. Temp query dot, and we're going to do, we have to do the same thing we did before. So we created the query. We now have to set up the connection for that query. So dot connection is equal to fd connection 1, and that is it. So that will be the firedac connection 1, which is on our form. And then we are going to update the port setting. So we're going to say temp query.sql.text is going to be equivalent to update settings, set the setting value equivalent to a tag of value, where the setting name is equal to a tagged value of name. That's that. Now we have to say temp query dot param by name, and we're going to say name dot string is equivalent to listen port. Now we're going to say temp query dot param by name value is going to be dot string equal to int to str spin edit one dot value. Temp query dot execute SQL. Done. Update auto listen setting. So now we'll put temp query dot SQL dot text. We're doing the same thing all over again, boys. We're going to update settings, set the setting value equal to a tag of value where the setting name is equivalent to a tag of name. Now temp query dot param by name, and this will be name. I'm basically just copying from the code above here, boys, just so you know. So just the name dot string, okay, is equal to, and then this is going to be auto listen. Got to be careful about what I'm doing there. So now we're going to say if toggle switch one dot state is equal to TSS on, then we can say temp query dot param by name value dot string colon equals 1. Else, here, let me go back and do else. We're going to do the temp query dot param by name value dot string is equal to 0. Like that. Temp query dot execute SQL. Now, underneath finally, here, let me control D this. We can come to the finally and free our query. Temp query dot free, and there you have it. So now we've done that, so we can call save settings anytime we want. So let me copy that. So let me go back to the rat. So like right here when we mess with this, like if we mess with this edit one change event, you can just save the settings. And then when you toggle this switch by clicking it, you go to the click event procedure, you can just save the settings, whatever it is. There you have it. See, because save settings, if we hold control and go to that, what we're doing is we're updating it with whatever the values are based on the components on the form. So if it has the value in there, we int to string, string to int, all that good stuff, and throw it into the database. And if this is on or off, based on its on or off, right down here where I said if it's on, or else if it's not, then it's 1 or 0 based on if this component is on or off. And we shove that into the database, you see? And we execute the SQL. So guys, that should be it. We should, in theory, we should be able to go ahead and give this a run and make sure that it works. So let's go ahead and do that, guys. Let's go ahead and run it and see if it actually does something, right? So here, let me release this. Let me go to the actual location real fast in File Explorer. I'm just going to make sure that I currently have everything that I need. So as you can see, it's empty right now. So I'm going to leave this off to the side. I'm going to build this. And once it builds, we're going to get a bunch of files, a bunch of DCUs. We're basically going to go ahead, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete these. These were used to compile the executable. The executable is all that's left. Now, as you can clearly see, there's no database file here whatsoever. But when I double click the rat to run it, as you can clearly see, we have a database and a database journal file now. Now, if we go to settings, you can see that 3434 is in here, and it's not auto listening or anything like that, right? So I'm going to change this to 3435 by doing that, and then I'm going to auto listen, and I want to close the rat. Now I'm going to double click the rat again. The journaling file, all the data that's piped through the exe was to the journaling file, has saved and executed into the database. So now all of the settings I just did in the rat are now pre-existing inside the database file. So I'm going to run the rat, and as you can clearly see, it is listening already on 3435. See? So if I turn that off and then close the rat and then run the rat again, now you can see that it's not listening, and we're able to do our stuff. You see that? The only other thing that I did just do, you'll want to make sure that you add the stop code. So on the button 2's click event procedure, you want to disable the socket. So make that server socket active false. Then you want to enable the ability for the user to select a new port. Make sure that you're enabling the spin edit. Make sure that you update the button 1 caption to listen and the button 1 enable to true, and then make sure that you disable the stop button. And this is pretty much all the code you need for the button 2. Okay, guys? And again, that's the stop button right here. So make sure that you copy that down and put it in there. Okay? And that's the only code changed on that button. Now let me show you something really, really cool. So let's open up Navicat real fast here. Okay? Let me copy this pathway to our database file. This is our live production database. So if I pull this over, let's delete this one real quick here. Let's go to delete connection. I don't need that crap. I'm also deleting that from my desktop. Okay, so this is the actual YouTube rat production database that we're messing with. So I've actually already got that in here. So as you can see, we have a settings table, and when we go into it, we've got a listen port, which is 3435, and we have auto listen to 0, right? So check this out. I'm going to close this out and leave it open, but I'm just going to minimize it. Now I'm going to run the rat. So let me go ahead and run the rat. And remember, we just saw that that value was 0 in auto listen. Now if I turn auto listen on and then close the rat, now if we open up Navicat and go back into the database, you're going to notice that that setting is 1. See? It updates that setting in the database. So here, I will close this again. Now watch carefully. So it was a 1, right? So if I run the rat, and it is listening automatically, see? So if I turn it off, then that's great. I want to also maybe stop it and turn this to 3436, right? So remember, that's 3436 now, and it should be 0 for auto listen, right? So I'm going to close that out. We're going to go back to Navicat, open the database, go back into the settings, and boom, 3436 and 0 off. The rat is fully functional and is able to save to and from the database. How cool is that? Okay, guys, so that pretty much sums up this this portion of this part of the rat course. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we're going to keep this code because we're definitely going to be able to use that going forward. Because going forward, we are going to have to make a builder functionality, so we'll have to add another tab probably down here or something. And also, we may be adding a lot of different settings for a lot of different things in the future. So for now, that's pretty much it. I will catch you boys in the next video. I really hope that you enjoyed learning about FireDAC and the ability to host your own locally hosted SQLite database files to save and load information to and from. So I'll just put that right there and save. All right, cool. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.